council website to the YouTube platform, where the public can view the meeting live and watch recordings of previous council meetings. In accordance with the Local Government Act 1993 and Regulation 33, these audio-visual files will be retained by council for at least 6 months and made available for viewing live, as well as online within 5 days of the scheduled meeting. The written minutes of the meeting, once confirmed, prevail over audio and video recording of that meeting. So I'd like to welcome the councillors, staff and members of the public and declare the meeting officially open. I think all the councillors are present and in attendance. Declaration of pecuniary interests in accordance with Regulation 8 of the Local Government Meeting Procedures Regulations 2005. The Mayor requests elected members to indicate they or have a close association have or are likely to have a pecuniary interest in any item on the agenda. And I have one from Councillor Woods that will remove herself with agenda item 1 under agenda item 3.1 under planning. Thank you. Someone care to confirm the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 30th of January? Councillor Woods, can we have a seconder? All those in favour? Carried, thank you. We now go to the, before we go to the planning, there's some amendments to your agenda this evening, councillors. Page 26, then supporting page 3. After that should read Swansea, not Franklin. Page 26 and then page 3.
At the top, just a minute.
Yeah.
The top line.
Top line.
In the summary.
We all got that? Page 71, the profit and loss and cash flow should read the 1st of July 2018 till the 30th of June 2019. Can you repeat that, sorry? Page 71, the profit and loss and cash flow should read the 1st of July 2018 to the 30th of June 2019. Also on page 71, attachment letter from TASSAL. Point 4 at the end should say Tas Water. Again on page 71, one should say the council authorises removed by absolute majority.
Matt, could you repeat that last one again, please?
Page 71,
Yep.
recommendation 1 should say the council authorises removed by absolute majority. Councillors also make sure their microphones are turned on, please. Thank you. Agenda item 3, the Planning Authority section, under Regulation 25 of the Local Government Meeting Procedures Regulation 2005. The chairperson hereby declares that the council is now acting in a planning authority under the provisions of the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act 1993 for section 3 of the agenda. Someone care to move the case?
And authority 504.
All those in favour? Unanimous, thank you. Agenda item 3.1, the removal and new access 56 Glengala Road, Cranbrook. The recommendation there is on page 18. somebody care to move the recommendation? Councillor Wisby?
Pursuant to Section 57 of the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act 1993 and the Glamorgan Spring Interim Planning Scheme 2015, that the application for tree removal and new access to the Amos Family Cemetery at Cranbrook, DA 2017/00127, be approved subject to conditions 1 through to 9.
Have a seconder for that motion, councillors. Councillor Parker? Now open for discussion, councillors. Yes, Councillor Crawford.
Thank you, Mayor Kent. I won't be supporting this DA today for the retrospective tree removal or the proposed new access. It's my belief there's sufficient grounds on which to refuse the application. Firstly, the new access that adjoins Freestone Creek would be more subject to periodical flooding than the public access that's there presently exists. Secondly, this proposed access would mean that the access to a working cemetery would be across private land, and thus there would be no legal surety of access. Regarding the new access under E 5.6.2 of the Performance Criteria 2D, it says any alternative access to the road. Well, there is already an alternative access to the road. P2DE, says the need for the access or the junction. I think they're not compliant because there is already, as I've said, an alternative access to the road, and the application does not prove there is need for another access to this location. There appears to be no need for another access to this property, particularly as Glen Heriot Lane is a Crown Road Reserve, and councillors have been informed the cemetery licences have been granted to for 50-year licence, which includes the right-of-way, which is part of the cemetery title and connects between Glen Heriot Lane and the cemetery. And this will be continued according to a representative, regardless of whether or not the DA application before us is approved. So there is really no need to have an extra access there. Also under the Waterway and Coastal Protection Area discretion, E11.7.1, acceptable solution 1, for DA 17127, doesn't comply in that Performance 1 says building and works within a waterway and coastal protection area must satisfy all of the following. B says mitigate and manage adverse erosion, sedimentation and runoff impacts on natural values. Well, as you've seen from the diagrams, it's already quite denuded in that waterway, but by putting in another access right next adjacent to it, it's actually certainly not going to improve that. It also says Performance 1B says, 1H, avoid landfilling of wetlands. Well, with another track right adjacent to that, there's a reasonable chance with the floods, and the floods do happen there if you've read in your report, that there will be a chance that there will be a wash away from that access track, more likely so than if it wasn't there. Also, the unnecessary use of machinery within the watercourses or wetlands can be avoided if that extra access is not granted. Also, the non-compliance under E13.7.2 read the works to the heritage place in that Performance 1 development works must not result in any of the following. Number B says the substantial diminishing of the historical cultural heritage significance of the place through the loss of significant streetscape elements, including trees that contribute to the significance of this place. This has in effect already happened with the removal of those trees, and also on that property, which the farmer has total right to do, has removed a lot of other trees that were there. So it has had a great impact that if those two trees that they're asking for retrospective permit, those would be quite significant now, in that those other trees that have been removed from that paddock. My point is that I don't think there should be a retrospective one, but it probably should be noted that the reason that happened is because of the inaccurate advice given by council to the applicant, rather than the applicant's not during the application today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Crawford. Further discussion? Councillors? No further discussion. I'll put the motion. All those in favour of the recommendation? Councillor Steiner, Deputy Mayor Arnold, myself and Councillor Farmer. Those against? Councillor Crawford, Councillor Wisby and Councillor Parker. The motion is lost, is it not? One, two, let me see. No.
You can't lose a planning application. There has to be a decision.
Oh, there has to be a decision. Okay. So we've got one, yeah? One.
If 4 voted.
Yeah, through.
4-3.
Yeah, so it's passed.
4-3. So the recommendation and motion is passed. Thank you. Agenda item 3.2, rezoning from community purpose zone of local business zone. Somebody care to move as a councillor the recommendation, which is on page 26, sorry.
Councillor Woods.
Can we return? Yes, I'm sorry.
You need to tell her what happened.
So, Councillor Woods, for your information, the recommendation has been approved and passed by council.
Thank you.
So again, 3.2, zone of local business zone, and the recommendation is on page 26. And I hope somebody to move, please. Councillor Woods.
I move that, as provided by the provisions of Section 3 of Schedule 6 of the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act 1993, in brackets LUPA, A, pursuant to Section 34(1)B Planning Scheme Amendment AM 201802 be initiated and certified as being in accordance with Sections 30 and 32 of LUPA to rezone Certificate of Title 113141/1 being part of 4 Arnold Street, Swansea, from Community Purpose Zone to Local Business Zone. B, pursuant to Section 38 of LUPA AM 2018/02 be placed on public exhibition for no less than 28 days. And C, pursuant to Section 39 of LUPA, if no representations are received during public exhibition, Council directs the General Manager to advise the Tasmanian Planning Commission in writing that no representations have been received.
We have a seconder for that motion, councillors. Councillor Farmer. Open for discussion, councillors. Councillor Crawford.
Thank you, Mayor Kent. I have a few questions first for the planner, through the chair. On page 21 of the supporting report, third last paragraph, it says the potential for land use conflict with existing or permissible uses is minimal. Adjacent land is foreshore, which has limited development potential other than for passive recreation purposes. I'd like to ask, where is that adjacent land that's foreshore?
Through the Mayor, that's an incorrect reference there, and that paragraph should be deleted.
Yeah. The other question I would like to ask through the chair of the planner is if you could please explain exactly with this that acceptable for councillors to just not support this, rather than could you actually explain the process please, clearly to councillors about whether they need to support this or not support it, and what reasons they need to give if they choose not to support it, please.
Through the Mayor, I can't offer reasons why you should I've offered a report with recommendations. I can't offer you reasons as to why you should not refuse that. I'm not entirely following the question. Obviously, council needs to meet the Judicial Review Act proceedings, and any recommendation on a planning authority needs to be supported by reasons. What they are presumably would be up to you, Councillor Crawford.
I think what I'm getting at, thank you, through the chair, is that if this is initiated from council, it's not actually initiated by council. That's what I'm actually asking. Is this initiated by council?
Through the Mayor, yes. A planning scheme amendment is always initiated by council. That initiation can be by council acting on its own motion or in response to a written request from an applicant.
So further to that, so this is this directly from council, or is this a written application from?
This, no, through the Mayor, this is council acting on its own motion. There's no written request from a third party.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll speak to the motion, please.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have a problem with this, councillors. I actually initially looked at it and I was a little bit concerned about the actual rezoning of this with the hall being rezoned into local business. Then when I read further and actually looked at the other implications, I became even more concerned. And I think it should have been workshopped. I think it still needs to be workshopped to look at it properly. If you actually look on page, to find that. I'm just looking for the graph, sorry, of where it says the, right, sorry, on page 13 of 21 of the supporting document. You actually have the interim and community purpose line. Then you have the interim local business, and that's actually what this proposal is to actually rezone it to interim local business. And the assumption would be that as soon as the statewide local business comes into being, that it would then go just directly into the statewide local business. If you actually have a look at the bottom of the document at the statewide local business column, you will see that equipment, machinery, sales and hire, that's still the same. Then you have manufacturing and processing, and you have food and beverage production that would then be allowable in that area near the hall, as well as just across from a childcare centre and many houses. You also see that under the local business zone that you actually have the acceptable solutions for operations is 7 o'clock to 9 o'clock, Mondays to Saturdays, 9 till 5. They're not performance, they're not discretionary, they're accepted. So you also have in those areas that you actually have much longer hours. They also can be extended out too if you go to the performance area around that. So it probably doesn't actually fit with business local. It perhaps does at Franklin Street, the commercial at the front of the street. Then you have like just across from where the road does the bend in Arnold Street, that's a childcare centre. And then all of the other ones that you can't see now are residential. So I actually think that it really needs to be discussed like at a workshop, or actually to look at the actual implications. It's not that easy. If we actually look at some of the reasons in that report that we have, like on page 19 of 21, talks about the Swansea Structure Plan. Well, quite frankly, have no respect for the integrity of that document, and we saw that in some of those things, 18 people disagreed with something, and there would be out of 22, but it still went into that structure plan.
Councillor Crawford, you have 1 minute.
Right, thank you. It also says on that page there's no adverse social or economic effects. Well, I don't actually agree with that either, because with the residential and also with manufacturing or even commercial vehicles allowed to use that thing, it would compromise the social and the child care. It talks about the commercial strip along Franklin Street, also in that objectives, and I don't disagree with that, but we're not talking about along Franklin Street. We're talking at the back of Arnold Street, alongside Arnold and the back of the hall. So I actually can't really support this today. I think it should have been workshopped, particularly if it's council that's actually looking at rechanging the zoning. So thank you, councillors, for your time.
Thank you, Councillor Crawford. Any other councillor comment? Councillor Farmer.
Just a clarification, Mr Mayor, to the planner. Off Arnold Street, the right-of-way to the back of the hall, I presume that's that dotted line there, the 4 metre wide?
Yes,
Comes off
correct.
it. So what's that implications relating to a person who purchases maybe in the future the SES building as such, combined with that car park at the front? That as a right-of-way, does that create a complication for the sale of the building?
Through the mayor, my understanding, an offer's been made on the building on the basis of this subdivision plan and that right of way. So I can't see any issue. I think they'd be comfortable. Otherwise, they wouldn't have made an offer. They will need to ensure that vehicles can access into the back of the hall, and the right of way is also in favour of the back of the adjoining property, the Horny Cray site as well.
So that was my next question, because it actually goes across is that the Horny Cray side, is it?
Yes, yes. So you'll see the
There's B
Horny
there,
Cray
so,
has an irregular sort of boundary. So the practical access to the rear of the hall is already over the Horny Cray property as well. So part of this is legitimising that existing arrangement with a right of way.
So that'll be a written agreement between the Horny Cray owners and the council.
Yep.
And I take it the other 2 blocks of land there are privately owned.
Potentially be impeded by vehicles coming and going. And it also gives as much land as possible to 100 and 101. Just they are relatively small blocks at 430 square metres. Yeah.
And I take it the behind the hall, it's going to be made a car park there for services to the hall.
It's an open grassed area at the moment.
Yeah.
It could be formalised if the need be. It's not that regularly used for vehicles. But.
Okay. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Any further comments, Councillor?
Yes.
Councillor Crawford.
I think.
Sorry.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Whether councillors agree or not with this particular rezoning, it needs to be remembered that this is just simply part of a process that allows the community, the affected community, to have input into the process. So if there are people within the Swansea community, or indeed our municipal area, that feel strongly enough about it, then they can lodge a representation after they've viewed the documents. So it really is, in my view, it is an excellent way to get input from the community as to what they believe our processes are in terms of planning.
Thank you. Councillor Crawford.
Thank you, Mayor Kent. I just want to ask the planner 2 questions. One is, if you actually look at page 9 of 21 that shows the square, sorry, not the rectangle, and then if you look at page 7, there's a little triangle that's on like block 100 or the other side of the access. I'm just wondering where that belongs, or which property, or what yeah, what's happening there, please?
Through the Mayor, figure 7 shows the current title boundaries. The subdivision that's been approved, the titles haven't been created to that, so they haven't been updated. And so essentially, lot 100, lot 101, and that triangle on figure 5, they're already zoned local business. So figure 6 shows the blue is all the areas now of local business zone. They're zoned that way now. They will be zoned that way in the statewide planning scheme. So you see there's already a series of local business zone properties. They do abut general residential zone. So there are zone boundary issues there. This is not really significantly changing that, and there are provisions in the planning scheme that do control amenities at the boundary, because that's where the conflict can be, obviously, between residential use and commercial use. I think in reality, now that the SES building has been disposed of, there's really no alternative zone other than the local business zone. It can't be community purpose when it's not community owned, and there's no other alternative zone that is practical given the local business zone that surrounds it.
Mayor Kent, I perhaps didn't explain clearly. That triangle that's on page 7, right, that's like between 102 and 100. That little, on the south side of the right of way. I'm just asking what property that belongs to, because it's...
Sure.
Yeah.
Once this subdivision plan that you see on figure 5 has been finalised and new titles issued, that section will belong to 102.
Thank you.
The motion? All those in favour? Councillor Wood, Councillor Stoner, Deputy Mayor, myself, Councillor Parker, Councillor Wisby and Councillor Burt. Motion is moved. Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry. Who's against? Councillor Crawford. My apologies. Right. Under Regulation 25 of the Local Government Meeting Procedures, Regulation 255, the chairperson hereby declares that the council is no longer now acting as a planning authority under the provisions of the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act 1993 for Section 3 of this agenda. Someone care to move? Councillor Wisby, Councillor Steiner, all those in favour? Unanimous. Councillor Crawford? You happy?
Oh, beg your pardon, I was sorry.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, sorry.
Public question time. Okay, everybody knows that questions can be asked. The answers will be given if they can, otherwise they'll be taken on notice. We can't go into a debate. Ask the question, we'll do our best to answer it. Ms Turvey's got a microphone that you can speak into if you so desire. So we'll start with Mr Murray right behind you, Ms Turvey.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. You personally have made much of the outcome of the survey of residents and ratepayers into potential council amalgamations, and council received at its January meeting an eloquent and in my professional opinion as a statistician highly appropriate analysis of interpretation of those results. Do you personally, Mayor, and does council in general share the view of many ratepayers that this represents a massive vote of no confidence in the administrative competence and effectiveness of the current council?
Better judgment, I'll take it on notice. Thank you. I'll respond.
Are we able to ask the council whether they wish to respond?
Well, it's a question to myself, by all means, if you so wish to ask any individual council. Totally up to you.
Sorry, I'm not aware of the procedure if you need a...
Yeah. So does any council want to comment at this particular point? Or we just accept it on notice and respond accordingly? Councillor Crawford.
I'm happy to respond for myself. I think that there's 76% of 9%, and I think the questionnaire that councillors, some councillors put out afterwards, I would think that I would like to see further a survey done asking that question and actually having more information that's actually accurate for those people that actually voted for amalgamation. So there's 9% of the 76%. Yeah, that would be my preference, to actually see where those problems are and if they actually just feel more attuned to the north or whether they're actually disgruntled for some other reason.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
I have a second question, if I may.
Yes.
With reference to agenda item 7.1, does council agree that this might reasonably be considered by the population as administrative incompetence if a more thorough and complete analysis of the fiscal consequences of any of a number of possible scenarios here were not considered in more detail, and, more importantly, if there was not a thorough, complete, transparent and publicly accessible risk analysis of this involving all of the stakeholders, including current ratepayers, who will, of course, be left with the baby if this does go pear-shaped. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, we'll certainly take that on notice and give it back to you in writing, right to the next meeting. Thank you. Mr. Baker. Jeff.
I'd like to commend the previous speaker on what he brought to your attention. Raw water. Are they still currently drawing treated water as opposed to raw water, which they were initially going to do? Treated water from the process scheme. Now, I've asked Tassel, I haven't got any answer for Tassel. The council, I believe, would have very close, and do have very close ties with Tas Water, and they should be able to tell me.
General Manager, comment?
Mr Mayor, I'm not aware that they're pulling out any treated water at this stage.
So if they're not pulling out treated water, they are using their desal barge with shore power. Is that what you're saying?
Correct. With shore power, did you say?
I know.
Yeah, well, why would they be tied up to the fish bill duty if they weren't hooked up to shore power?
Because
Well, we don't want to go into debate here, please.
So you're saying that they're using their desal plant?
Correct.
Correct. So why the hell are we even thinking about water if they can continue to do that?
The water is a multi-use thing. Solace won't go without water, and neither will the farmers. So, and neither will Tas Water in the future. So
it's a
it allows
60 million,
growth.
Gentlemen, please. Thank you. Question's been answered. Penny Davidson.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to commend Mr Murray for his comments. And I don't have a question now because my question was almost aligned to his. Thank you.
Thank you. Diane Anderson.
I think this is about the 6th time I've asked. Is there any progress on the tip shop at Swansea, please?
Manager.
Mr Mayor, the report's been received and we're working on that, and that will be considered in next year's budget, the allocation of funds. The report was in this year's budget, the report dollars, and that's what we've got, and we have to sit down and work out what it's going to cost and put it up to council next year.
One more, Julie Norton.
Yes, this is a... Thank you.
question for Councillor Deputy Wisby. Why did you say in the local pub that, I'm fine, thanks, I've got a learn voice, that my sister's property in Inkerman Street was sold for a value of unpaid rates and before it went on the open market, and that you were going to bring it up in the next council meeting?
At the local pub. I'm sorry, I've got no idea what you're talking about. Maybe you can write me a letter or something, and it's not to be debated as the statement.
It's not a debate, it's a question.
If you'd like to let me answer, that would be great. Mayor Kent, I'm not going to answer because the lady in the corner is being really inappropriate.
Okay.
Mr Mayor, can we then, my second question, put this on record and I can put something in writing and have you consider this because it's quite serious?
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Duly noted. Thank you very much. Okay, we move on to agenda item 5, information reports from the General Manager to start with and his managers. Thank you, General Manager. Any questions to the General Manager on his report? Councillors.
Mayor Kent, I've got a question. Page 34, the Maria Island Rediscovered project update. It says there's a representative from the local council. Is that not a councillor?
Mr Mayor, no it isn't.
So it's a staff representative rather than a councillor?
Correct.
Okie doke. And I think that's my only question in that.
Thank you. Any other councillors? Any questions on the General Manager's report? Councillor Crawford.
Thank you, Mayor Kent. On page 29, under the corporate services, it says a review of council reporting underway. I just wanted more information or clarification on that, please.
Through you, Mayor, as the Mayor and the Deputy know, I'm going to work with them on a new reporting package for the agenda, and then it'll be workshopped with Council to see if it's acceptable. It's time we updated our reporting. So.
Right, thank you.
Any other questions, councillors?
Yes, Mr Mayor. Just on page 37, just to the General Manager through you, Mr Mayor, mentions there about asbestos assessment and register on under council buildings on page 37. Is that going to happen, or is it what's the planning stage there with that?
Mr Mayor, it all gets back to trying to get resources to do it. So yeah, we need to find an appropriate consultant to do that. Most of our buildings are asbestos free, thank goodness. All the halls we've done, all the other renovations we've done are all asbestos free. So, but we do have to have an asbestos register under legislation. So
the toilets down at the Orford Hall and that, and down at the old hall here, the asbestos checks are done before you do the renovations. Of course.
Through you, Mayor, absolutely.
Right, okay. Jim?
Councillor Crawford.
Thank you, Mayor Kent. Page 42, regarding waste, green waste, I want to actually ask about, councillors will be aware that in Coles Bay, that green waste is trucked to Bishno and then burnt. I'm just wondering the cost of those, or whether other alternatives have been looked at with that situation.
General Manager.
Mr Mayor, we run an efficient waste system. Unfortunately, we don't have approval to burn it in the National Park, and that's why we have to take it to Bishno. So I don't have an individual cost for that, but I'd be happy to provide it.
Thank you. Any further questions, councillors? Councillor Farmer.
Yeah, I see we've moved on to, because Mr Tony Pollard's not here tonight, so the General Manager's actually standing in for the Works Manager. I'm just going to ask a question regarding Wailancta Road. as you know, that our council's done a magnificent job on our end of Wallington Road, sealing the first 3 or 4 kilometres, and then right down to Rebben Road, it's in very good condition. On the other side of Wallington Road, which is at Copping as such, and comes to the highway, there's also a sealed road there. And I think what's the story is now that the centrepiece is atrocious. I was led to believe that the centre section was under the control of the Sorell Council. I wrote to the council, Sorell Council, and got a letter back to, when I was going to show up, I haven't got it, that they claim that National Parks and Wildlife Service actually are in control of the centre portion of the Wallington Road. It's got nothing to do with the Sorell Council. That leads a bit of a quandary, I think. I've never heard of that situation before, but that's coming from the works manager of the Sorell Council. The problem I can see that some of the tourists have been telling me that their GPS is telling them to go through the Wallington Road when they come from Port Arthur to Orford. Of course, they go onto the road at Coppin, and it's a nice sealed road, and I think this is all right. And then they get to the gravel, and then they get to Wallington Road. Some of these tourists are coming through almost in the dark, because that's what tourists do these days, especially the Asian tourists, with their hire cars, and because they're getting caught up in the Wallington Road. And it's, as I said, it's a 4-wheel drive. So my question would be to the general manager if he could liaise with the general manager of Sorell and put up a warning sign at Copping to warn tourist vehicles coming from Copping through the Wallington Road that it's not suitable for hire cars, 4-wheel drive only, and the same sign could be put up at the Rebben Road and the Wallington Road junction on this end. At least that gives some warning to the tourists that they can't use the Wallington Road because it is really rough as guts. And secondly, that maybe the general managers can confer with each other and see what the real ownership of this particular road is, because it seems to be passing the buck again by the Sorell Council.
General Manager.
Mr Mayor, we officially own 23 kilometres of it now, and the second portion of that will be fixed up by June. And then there's a portion after that that Sorell own. So as far as I'm concerned, Parks and Crown and everybody else won't own any of it.
Yet Sorell Council's denying any ownership whatsoever. I'll pass you the email so you can see that, yes.
Okay. We'll take it up. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Any further questions? Councillor Crawford.
Thank you, Mayor Kent. On page 59, just attended my first Marine Infrastructure Committee meeting yesterday. It says the Tribunal Wharf and Marina. It says the council's currently working on a parking plan to maximise the available areas for parking. Also, the council is installing traffic calming measures to maximise safety around the Marina and Wharf complex. I read through the last few years of the Marine Infrastructure minutes, and that parking plan has certainly been on in the minutes for 2 years. It's still not forthcoming. My question is, with the calming measures, what are they? Where will they be, and are they permanent? Given that the permanent parking consultancy or whatever hasn't been finalised yet.
General Manager.
Mr Mayor, Councillor Crawford, as she said, was at the Marine Infrastructure meeting yesterday. She should have asked that of the Marine Manager. I've no idea, but the parking plan is part of the future plan for the whole marina complex. So.
Thank you, Mayor Kent. The Marine Infrastructure Manager didn't actually know. The other question I had is also at that same committee meeting was talk that the government had put the Crown land adjacent to the marina and wharf out for expressions of interest, and I had a look last night and couldn't find it. I'm just wondering if what the situation is, if you're aware of the situation or whatever on that.
General Manager.
Mr Mayor, it hasn't been put out to expressions of interest.
Further questions, councillors? Councillor Steiner.
Mr Mayor, going back to page 34 of the report, May I make a suggestion that perhaps membership to external committees, unless that external committee specifically asks for the general manager to become a member, that should actually come to council so that we can deliberate on it, and perhaps we can have some sort of policy to inform that as well.
A comment on that, General Manager?
Mr Mayor, this was an invited thing with officers of the Crown, officers of Parks and officers of Council. There was no chance for elected representatives to be part of it.
Through you, Mr Mayor, it's not only this particular committee that I'm talking about, it's our membership to any external committee in the future as well, that we actually have a policy that takes account of the fact that councillors have some expertise as well to offer in these cases.
Okay, duly noted. Thank you. Any further comment, councillors? The recommendation management reports be received and noted. Agenda item 6, minutes of section 24 committees. There are no section 24 committee meetings of the February agenda. So we move on to agenda item 7, officers' reports requiring a decision.
Mr Mayor, I'll move, thank you. On page 71, that Council authorises the General Manager to proceed with stage 1 of the Prosser Plains Raw Water Scheme construction of pipeline from Prosser River to Oakhampton Bay using funding previously authorised by Council, refer decision 1317, including the increase in borrowings to $5 million. And number 2, that Council authorises the General Manager to enter into formal agreement with Tassal for the delivery of raw water to Oakhampton on a full cost recovery basis and detailed in the attached summary of cost on the pipeline.
Do we have a seconder, councillors? Councillor Farmer. Thank you. Open for discussion, councillors. General Manager, do you want to add anything to this discussion before we start?
Mr Mayor, if I may, it's a golden opportunity for a business for council that won't cost the ratepayers any money, as does the marina and as does the wharf. So, well, the wharf costs money, but the whole marina concept doesn't cost council money, and it adds to the coffers of council. This provides an opportunity for council to own a common piece of infrastructure. If one person or one company owned it, it wouldn't be shared. It's a golden opportunity in the future to have 6,000 megalitres, one of the biggest schemes in Tasmania, available to our farmers and other commercial users. So, and being underwritten by a company like Tassal, I think it's a golden opportunity that shouldn't be missed.
Okay, councillors.
Sorry, can I just clarify a point? With a letter from the letter of commitment from Tassal, on the second paragraph it talks about the project committee. Can the General Manager explain who they are, or who they consist of, and what are they?
Mr Mayor, the project committees consists of myself, senior executive from Tassal, David Burt, who's the project manager, and Mr Shane Wells.
Thank you.
Sorry, Mr Mayor, could you ask the General Manager to repeat that, please?
Yep, it consists of myself, a senior executive of Tassal, the project manager for the whole project, David Burt, and Mr Shane Wells.
Councillor Wisby.
Thanks, Mayor Kent. This significant matter has not been workshopped. New information has been presented in the agenda without any prior knowledge. Mayor Kent, what's the term of the loan?
General Manager.
30 years, Mr Mayor. It was all in the original recommendation back in January 17 in that report.
Okay, so thank you. So funds have been expended when the dam site is presently awaiting final approval from the EPBC federal government agency, with no timelines placed on when this approval may be forthcoming. I can't believe this request to increase borrowings is on the table when EPBC approval has not been granted. Why are we even considering increasing the borrowing or continuing with the Twomley Dam now there seems to be a viable alternative at Hobbs Lagoon? And what's going on at Solace, as that's part of this whole matter? Prior to me becoming a councillor, I was told Solace would give council the golf course land for $1 on the condition that council fund all costs associated with developing the golf course, taking on the risk of the golf course, etc. Then a couple of years ago, council staff was trying to secure $3 million from federal funds, $3 million from state, and a match of $3 million from ratepayer funds or borrowed funds. Then there was a change last year and only $1.5 million was noted in the budget for Solace, which would have been another ratepayer loan. Now council has received approval from Treasury to borrow $6 million in this financial year. In the last financial year we could borrow $6 million, however that took us very, very close to our complete borrowing capacity. I hope councillors understand that we will have basically very limited borrowing capacity for many years if these funds are borrowed. In the event of a natural disaster or replacement of a lost bridge, how will we come up with the money? How is the golf course going to be funded? Remember, the golf course is one of the customers that pay for this project. This is important. What happens if a council overcommits or cannot meet its financial commitments? We would be forced into administration. What's next? Amalgamation. Surely all councillors can see the real and significant risks associated with this proposal. Tassal has said that if council reasonably decides to discontinue with the project prior to construction, Tassal will reimburse council for any and all associated costs, etc. There is that word again, reasonable. What is reasonable? Reasonable is an objective test. In the Tassal Finfish Aquaculture at Oakhampton Bay, Tasmania submission to the EPBC, Mark Ryan, the CEO of Tassal, signed a declaration stating, I, Mark Ryan, declare that to the best of my knowledge, the information I have given on or attached to this EPBC Act referral is complete, current and correct. I understand that giving false or misleading information is a serious offence.
Please, Councillor Wisby, 1 minute.
I can hear you.
Well, thanks very much.
Thank you. False or misleading information is a serious offence. In that statement, at point 1.11, it said, provide an estimated start and estimated end date for the proposed action, the action being the finfish farming at Oakhampton Bay. The start date was August 2017. The end date was 2026. That's 8 years from now. We're talking about a 30-year loan. Mark Ryan signed a declaration that Tassal intend to leave Oakhampton Bay in 8 years. Where does that leave the ratepayer? With a big dam and a big debt. In addition to this, we have the risk of over-borrowing and the risk of forced amalgamation, not voluntary but forced. We must have firm and binding contracts in place before even considering this, along with all approvals granted. Is this the dangerous road we wish to go down for our residents and ratepayers? So clearly I won't be supporting this afternoon.
Thank you. Any General Manager? Further comments?
Mr Mayor, that was a lot about Tassal and not about water, but that's fine. Councillor Wisby made a statement that we've reached our borrowing limit. I don't know where she's got that from. Treasury would not give out $6 million to a council that couldn't afford it. So in theory, we can actually pay off that loan without Tassal's income if we needed to. So we've done borrowings before for marinas and everything else, and I've heard all those questions before, but they will put downward pressure on rates, and so will this over time. Now, I don't know anything about 8 years, where Tassal's getting out in 8 years, but there's a letter of commitment which can be firmed into a contract once we know the final costs for Tassal to pay all the costs of that water scheme. And now that water scheme can be extended to Oakhampton Bay, and it can also be extended 20 kilometres north from that area to service those farmers that are in desperate need of water. And you also mentioned about the water source. The water source is only 65% reliable. That first one, Twomley Dam, is 95% reliable. And that's why we need a combination of them both.
Thank you. Councillors.
Mr Mayor, I should also say that it was announced today by the Honourable Dr John McVie, MP, the Minister for Regional Development, that the Glamorgan Spring Bay Council has been awarded $2.337 million to build the dam.
Thank you. Councillors, further questions? Councillor Farmer.
Just a query on that. Mark Ryan has actually been advertising in the paper that Tassal is going offshore in the next few years. They've been talking about it quite extensively.
Mr Mayor, could I just call a point of order here? I am struggling with the concept that councillors are actually naming people within this chamber. Within this chamber, I need to remind councillors that you do not have parliamentary privilege. And our meetings are now live streamed. I think it is inappropriate for councillors to be naming business people particularly. It's bad enough that we're naming companies. It is worse that we are naming business people.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
I take it on night, but in the newspaper, in the Mercury newspaper, he signed these letters as his name on the bottom of the, and I'm just asking the question, is there any indication that that will occur? I mean, I'm just wondering that the loan period is 30 years, and they're talking about 8 years. Have you any information on that, Mr. Chair?
Mr Mayor, the letter of commitment is an open letter of commitment, which means they will pay for the whole scheme. If they abandon Oakhampton Bay and go out to wherever, I would win is not imagine it's expansion. That's what the cement companies are about, expanding. Not looking for, they certainly look for other locations, but it's all about expansion. And I mean, you won't get a company like Tassal to give you that kind of guarantee. They're trying to support the community and getting the community's water assured and the commercial activities that will bring.
And so, as another question, Mr Mayor, if I could, what's the hold-up with the federal government? Why are they going to take up to 3 years to sign a document?
Well, it hasn't been 3 years, but there's it's about a swift parrot habitat and it's about offsets. So we expect to know in the next 2 weeks, and we expect approval on that. And then the approval goes to the assessment committee for dam construction, and then the dam's approved, basically.
Thank you.
Further questions, councillor, before the motion is put? Councillor Crawford.
Thank you, Mayor Kent. I'm extremely disappointed and I'm annoyed as well to find that such a complex, modified and costly project has found its way onto the agenda without a workshop and prior discussion. I'd like it to be noted publicly that it was only 4 days ago is the first time I was being made aware of the Hobbs Lagoon proposal. Unfortunately, it's not taken too long for the costs for the pipeline and the dam to increase significantly, and this before work has begun. It now appears that an alternative supply of water. Might councillors see that in the recommendation it talks about with stage one. Well, I'm not actually really sure what stage one is. I haven't actually seen in any of the documents what stage one is. So even if I was supporting this, I couldn't support it because I actually don't have the information. It's not actually in the three pages that we actually received in the agenda. $4.5 million was to be ratepayers' investment, and that was to be the sum total of the ratepayers' commitment already. That commitment has begun increasing. And somehow there is some justification for ratepayers to also construct and own the underwater section of Oakhampton Bay. This section was originally to be solely Tassal's responsibility. I'd expect this is also the section that is the greatest risk, reconstruction, the difficulty and the blowout of costs. So as a council, I'm given just 3 pages of information. And kind of went back to, you know, January agenda from last year. Had to look through that to see, well, I'm not actually sure what's relevant in that and what's not anymore. So if there's another Hobbs Lagoon in that, and I assume another pipeline or something, I can only have an assumption, then what of the business plan and whatever is relevant anymore, I don't know. So as given just 3 pages, and we asked to approve the loan borrowings of $5 million. I nor should any other council be prepared to support this recommendation with a clear business plan, a current one that we actually know is current, not just looking back into the agenda from a year ago, and a clear understanding of what each stage involves. I think Councillor Farmer asked the question about the representatives of the project committee, and I was under the illusion that it was just 2, because in the memorandum of understanding and a letter of commitment, on the 2nd paragraph, it talks about there will be a project committee comprising 1 representative from the council and 1 from Tassal, who will be responsible for the successful execution of the project. So once again, I had a misunderstanding there because I didn't have all the information. As I said before, I'm very disappointed. We also talk about there might be a MOU, but once the General Manager has said to me in a council meeting that a MOU is not worth the paper it's written on, what I'd actually like to see before we even consider this is an execution of a binding agreement. So that might not actually have the figures, but a binding agreement, a contract between Tassal and council. I think to consider anything else would not be doing my job as a councillor. The other thing is in the original we talked about 3,833 per megalitre upfront costs. That was one option for a buy-in. That would be 1.149 million for Solace if they were to buy into that, and nearly 2 million for Tassal. And I would actually like to look at certainly those options in a workshop before I'd actually like to consider for council ratepayers to actually be borrowing that 5 million. So I don't have enough information, and I can't be sure of what's been really said, what stage 1 is, what stage 2 is, what order it's going to be in, what the 5 million for, is that just the stage 1, is that part of stage 2? So I really can't support this today. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comment, councillors, before I put the recommendation?
Could I respond to that?
General Manager, yes.
Stage 1, Mr Mayor, is actually stated in recommendation 1, which says it's a construction of pipeline from Prosser River to Oakhampton Bay. So that's stage 1. Councillor Crawford talked about an increase in cost. There has been no increase in cost. What we've done is added a pipeline to an existing pipeline, so the cost is exactly the same. What we can see as a group is the benefit in owning the whole pipeline, in tendering for the whole pipeline and delivering the water to that northern section of the municipality. Councillor Crawford also said they're being asked to approve 5 million. They've already approved 4.5 million. So what I'm basically asking for is an extra 500,000. And she mentioned about the project team. The actual project team is the General Manager and the Executive from Tassal. We're advised by Mr Wells and Mr Burt.
Okay, thank you. I put the recommendation.
Mr Mayor, could I?
Deputy Mayor?
Mr Mayor, council laws were offered the opportunity of a workshop in relation to water-related matters, and unfortunately availability was difficult at the time. I understand the opposition to this because of the salmon industry and the opposition to that. I think it's really, really important to remember that this is not about one industry. This is about the opportunity to provide surety of water for a whole community. And we all know that surety of water is the economic driver for any community. So I would be disappointed if this is not approved today. We need to take the personality out of it in relation to the opposition and look at it for what it is, surety of water for a whole community.
Point of
Thank
order.
you.
I actually feel that Deputy Mayor Arnold has actually misconstrued what I've said. I've never said anything about Tasso. I've never said about that business. For me, it's about good governance and financial probity. So for me, it is not about what company it is affected. So I actually felt in what Deputy Mayor Arnold said that she was misconstruing where I certainly was coming from.
Thank you. Any further comments, councillors?
Mayor King, could I just basically ditto what Councillor Crawford has said, because, yeah, mine's certainly not personality-based.
Thank you, Councillor Whitby.
Thank you.
I put the recommendation. All those in favour? So it's Councillor Woods, Councillor Steiner, the Deputy Mayor, myself, Councillor Parker and Councillor Farmer. Those against? Councillor Crawford and Councillor Wisby. The motion is passed. Thank you, and the recommendation is passed. Thank you. Agenda item 7.2, petition received. The recommendation there, the council receives the petition and notes the intention of the petition. And given council has already resolved the issue of further investigating voluntary amalgamations in the negative, that no further action be taken on the petition and that the authors be notified of the outcome.
Mover and a seconder for that, Mr. Mayor.
Someone care to move? Second it. Mover. Mover. Councillor Woods. Have a seconder. Councillor Parker. All those in favour? Unanimous. Thank you. 7.3, Swansea Primary School Association. Recommendation approves grant for $1,000 for the primary school towards the cost of purchasing 4 new swings for the playground. Move Councillor Steiner, second Councillor Woods. All those in favour? Against? Unanimous. Carried. Thank you. 7.4, Cities Power Partnership, National Climate Change. Recommendation, the council endorses the selection of 5 proposed climate change action pledges. Comments, councillors?
I'll move, Mr Mayor, that council endorses the selection of 5 proposed climate change action pledges.
Your seconder? Councillor Steiner. All those in favour?
I'd like to speak, please.
Certainly,
Mayor Kent.
Councillor Crawford.
Thank you. It's not that I'm in disagreement with the pledges or the 5. I would have actually liked to see what other key actions from the partnership pledge options were available. So that's one thing I'd like to have seen. I assume there is more than 5. Pledge 3, I'm not actually really sure what's expected there. So some of these things work together and implement an education and behaviour change program to influence the behaviour of council officers, residents and businesses within the municipality to drive the shift to renewable energy, energy efficiency and sustainable transport. So to develop an education behaviour change program. So it actually, it would be nice to see maybe a timeline on those to see when they perhaps might come back to council for support. The other one that I actually had a problem with was going to ask about on pledge 4, where the replacement of the street lighting, whether there's been a cost of those, of the cost of running them and the cost of replacement, rather than waiting for rolling out the energy efficiency lighting, waiting till they actually need to be replaced. So I'd like to see a costing of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Crawford. Any comments? Councillors? I put the recommendation. All those in favour? Councillor Woods, Councillor Steiner, Councillor Crawford, Deputy Mayor, myself, Councillor Parker, Councillor Wisby, Councillor Farmer, unanimously. Thank you very much. Agenda item 8, motion tracking document. Any comments there from the recommendation is that the council receives and notes the information contained on the motion tracking document. Any questions?
Yeah, I've got one, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Steiner.
I'm not sure whether the General Manager is at liberty to actually disclose who, on page 78, under the notice of motion Botel Development, to disclose who those developers are for the Botels.
No, Mr Mayor, it's commercial in confidence.
Okay, thank you.
If there's an open process done by the Crown, they'll be announced by the Crown.
Thank you.
Any further questions, councillors? No further questions. Agenda item 9, questions without notice, councillors. Councillor Farmer.
I note that it's going to get better as it goes on, as we get into colder months, but we've had a huge amount of traffic in Tribunna, especially those towing caravans. And as you know, we've had complaints from the shop owners. I know we've got a 30-minute time limit outside the chemist shop, and I see now there's a quarter-hour time limit outside the butcher shop in Charles Street. Would the council consider having the eastern side of Charles Street designated as a 1-hour parking zone, as against just that one spot as a quarter hour, just to give the local businesses, supermarket, the butcher, the tea rooms, and the other ones. Present time, the caravan in a vehicle take up 3 spots pretty well, while they go to Mariah. And I asked the general manager, has he contacted the visitor centre regarding asking the people that are selling tickets to the ferry for camping situations, that they park vehicles over in the tennis court area as long-term parking? Has there been any motion towards putting a sign up of long-term parking over there, so people are aware there are long-term parking zones over there?
General Manager.
No, Mr Mayor, but you know, we're working on an overall parking strategy. So
yeah, I thought that mainly pertained to the actual marina. I'm talking about the streets.
And before Councillor Farmer's time, we actually had a streetscape and all the stuff worked out for Tribunna. So you might need to pick that up, Councillor Farmer, and have a look at all that. But that shows all the parking in the main street and the time limits and the landscaping. And
so what
Tribunna tomorrow it's called.
Is it? Okay. So that includes time limiting parking too?
Well, it can, yes.
It can?
Yeah.
I've seen the document, I didn't realise.
But time limited parking, who's going to police it? Yes.
Well, we hope we've got a paid police officer in the area. I mean, once you get legal signs, I mean, hopefully we can even make our marina man an authorised officer.
I don't think that'll be much fun for him.
No, but that's what he's there for. He had a chip at me the other day because I double parked.
That's
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Any further questions without notice, councillors? Councillor Wisby.
Mayor Kent, I'm referring to the media release, your media release dated the 19th of the 2nd, and it's just something here I'm a bit confused about. You say, I feel I'm the only member of council showing any leadership, given 76% of the community have indicated they support voluntary council amalgamations. it wasn't 76% of the community supported it. It was 76% of the people that answered the survey, which was only around 9% of the community. So possibly the media release can be adjusted to actually give the right information, because it wasn't 76% of the community as stated. And also, this one I'm confused also, at the special meeting held on the 20th of February, after item 1.1, you directed the General Manager to read a letter from the Director of Local Government. And I've never seen this happen before at this point in a meeting. The letter was not on the agenda and could not be part of the next agenda item being 1.2 or even 1.3. It could have come into 2.2, but the meeting was closed off before that point. So can you let me know, or could you please advise, where in the local government meeting procedures you as chair are permitted to do what you did in that reading the letter out at item 1.2, which wasn't that item?
Take that on notice, Councillor Wisby.
Thanks.
Any further questions, councillors? Councillor Crawford.
Thank you, Mayor Kent. I had a couple from Coles Bay, but I've actually forgot to bring them, so I'll actually send them by email in the next couple of days. But I would like to ask a question about signs. We actually had a signage committee, and we actually talked about that, and it was quite obvious what the acceptable performance criteria are. There is a lot of signs that, new signs that are going up that I'm just wondering what's happening about those that are not, they wouldn't have a permit, I'm sure, because they don't actually fit in to the criteria for them.
Yes, Mr Mayor, we've started work on those, so.
Any further questions from councillors?
Just further to that, what does "we've started work" mean? Has there been letters gone out, or what's the situation?
Mr Mayor, we're auditing the ones that are approved and the ones that are not approved and taking the appropriate action.
Thank you.
No further questions, councillors. I declare the meeting closed and make sure the live streaming is now